Hello, everyone. Nadia Cater here. One of the responses to our Celebrating Breaks listener email request was on existential questions related to the nature of our work. They gave us so much to think about and talk about, so we ended up having to split the conversation into its own episode. And we hope that this opens up more conversations on the nature of our work and how we can support each other and build towards more ethical work environments. We hope you enjoy and thank you for listening.
So in our last category, we actually had a very different from the rest of the input. So one of the things is we tried to kind of categorize as best as possible. And I don't think we mentioned this earlier, but we keep our listener emails anonymous because we've gotten in the past a few people that asked to remain anonymous. And we said, let's just make it easier and make everyone anonymous. So this is an anonymous colleague sent us, I guess that the term, I phrased this as existential musings about work. And I'm just going to read what they wrote to us. And then we're going to respond. Why do we have to recharge to begin with? What are the conditions in place that contribute to feelings of depletion? What are the particular aspects of adult education jobs that generate feelings of being run down or burning out? Common cited causes for quitting jobs are micromanagement, poor management, toxic work culture and conflict, work-life imbalance, low salaries, limited recognition, insufficient resources, unclear responsibilities, and poor team cohesion, lack of growth opportunities, and feelings of purposelessness. What job aspects can be improved within adult education in New Mexico? Are there / could there be built-in systematic mechanisms that keep people engaged, positive, and balanced? Are there ways to learn self-advocacy? How can uninspiring work environments be changed to reinvigorate them and make them a workplace where vacations are not critically essential mental health breaks, but ways to demonstrate a balanced life? As work conditions deteriorate, more people leave. When people leave, the ones left behind are forced to redirect energy to rebuilding. I am thinking specifically of hiring. It is harder to find staff, and more hours are necessarily spent on job descriptions, job postings, vetting applications, serving on hiring panels, interviewing, onboarding, not to mention doing the work of the missing staff positions. With more of my hours devoted to hiring, fewer hours are spent on program function tasks, and even fewer hours, or none at all, are spent on the meta aspects that can inspire innovation and creativity, and consequently those things that make work exciting and add to the attractiveness of what we do. So I kind of tried to break this down just using their example of job hiring, right? So we broke this down to like tasks: updating / writing job descriptions, vetting applications, interviewing, onboarding, doing the work of the missing position. How does this affect the day-to-day operations, right? So one thing they mentioned was being creative, finding new solutions, evolving your practice, being in survival mode versus being in like a growth mindset for your career. And it takes away from the opportunity to dream. So this one kind of hit us hard, and we've been reflecting on this since we got it, and trying to think about how can we tie this in to this episode of Celebrating Breaks, because it is a part of that. The Celebrating Breaks, a part of the breaks is also why we need breaks in the first place, and the conditions that are created. So, Jamie, did you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'm kind of work backwards a little bit, because I very much relate to this conundrum of high staff turnover resulting in the constant need to rehire, retrain, reorient, and things like that. I feel this person's pain 100%. Hiring, just the whole process of hiring, everything that you were outlining, Nadia, takes so much time and effort. And there's been quite a few people that have mentioned having to do the work of the missing position until that position is filled. It's something I've done. I've heard a lot of people, like I said, say that they have to do that. And it is absolutely exhausting, having to go through resumes, having to go through interviews, having to really do your best to choose the best candidate for that position with, to be very honest, kind of limited information at the onset. You don't necessarily know if this person is going to pan out as a long-term hire, as someone who is going to be a valued and, an essential part of your team with the information you have. You don't know that. Time will show you that. And so having that limited information and trying to make sure that you hire the right person can be emotionally and mentally taxing. And this really leads into all those other things. There are so many things in our position, whether we're administrators, instructors, data professionals, any other kind of support staff, doesn't matter. In our field, we give so much. Our field is mentally and emotionally exhausting. We love what we do. I have no doubt that everyone in the adult education field is here because we love what we do. We are giving back to the community. We are improving lives. We believe in education, particularly adult education and literacy. This is what we love to do. It's not about that. It's not about not loving what we do. And I don't think that this person's even implying that either. I think that, no matter what we do, absolutely love what we do. But it does take its toll on us. And a part of that is the systematic issue of low funding or lack of support from our parent institutions, if we have parent institutions, having to sometimes work 2 or 3 positions for years because there's just not the budget even to hire other positions. That is very common in adult education. And I don't even think that it's an intentional part of the culture. It's a necessary part of the culture. And thankfully, we're doing everything we can to change that. We're working very hard on a legislative level to make sure that our state legislators and our federal legislators know how important, how essential, how needed adult education and literacy are so that we can have the funding to have the people that we need. We could have our funding tripled, to be honest. We could have our budget tripled and still not have enough to serve the need. We have to get there. We have to build to that point. And so right now we're in this kind of position where we are in survival mode. And that's the term I would use for that when we're looking at what this person had said, that there are fewer hours that, or none at all, that are spent on the meta aspects that can inspire innovation and creativity. Those things don't come from survival mode. You have to get out of that survival mode to be able to do those things. And this person is very right. These are the things that make our work very exciting and add to that allure of what we do. And so, I think one of the big things that we should think about is how can we support each other in doing that? How can, administrators in particular, how can administrators help to ensure that the culture of their teams is one of constant appreciation, is one of understanding and listening to the needs of the staff as well as the students, but yes, of the staff too. And how can we support each other so that breaks are not these, necessary mental health breaks, that they are just that natural part of the work-life balance? Because no matter what you do, no matter what field you're in, doesn't matter, we all need breaks. We all need to just take some time away from our jobs and careers, whether we love our jobs and careers or not. It's always good to have breaks. That's why we don't work 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We need that time away to have that kind of balance. And so, what can we do? What can we do to support each other in finding that balance and creating that environment that allows for that balance and creating that environment that supports a person wanting to have that balance, I think, is really important. So I think I've done enough ranting for the moment. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Nadia, for your thoughts.
Right. So just looking at the overall, so one of the things that stood out to me was especially about work culture. So I don't know if this is well known, but culture comes from the top. It comes from leadership. And I'm not even talking about being micromanagement, but or poor managing, but how they work has an effect on how everyone else works. Even if they don't discuss the amount that people overload themselves, that overloading trickles down. And that has an effect on thoughts, that has an effect on communication, that has an effect on doing anything like the listener wrote, is like doing innovative stuff. And part of that is really recognizing that as leaders, hopefully we're talking to leaders in this episode. And one thing I pulled up is the professional learning toolkit. And one of the domain competencies, is providing leadership to manage program instruction and personnel effectively. Recruits, hires, trains, evaluates, and terminates staff based on established criteria. And the performance indicator under that is creates a program culture where staff, faculty, and learners are treated with fairness, dignity, and respect. Ensures staff and faculty follow program policies and procedures, and maintains a clear and accessible communication system to relay information and receive input from all staff and faculty. So speaking to leaders in the field, this is something where the self-reflection comes in. What is going on in your org? What is your staff telling you? What are they not telling you? How are they responding to change? What happens when there is that missing position? Who is taking on responsibilities? Are they distributed among multiple staff members? Is it just the middle manager, like a coordinator or something, or some teachers or instructor coordinator or whatever? Like what is the procedure? Because in those cases, you can control for aspects of the org. There are things that you can't control, obviously, that always happen. You cannot always control when someone leaves, especially if someone leaves 2 weeks before the semester starts. But what you can control is how are you balancing delegation? How are you communicating to the staff of this responsibilities? How are you giving them that appreciation as well as helping them maintain that workload? Is your workload maintained, or are you just constantly busy? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be busy so much as really think about how you're working. What are your processes? How does this work? Is there a way that you could spend some time on improving a process so that when it trickles down, when you delegate, it's better off for the people you're delegating to? These are management skills, and they're not easy, but there are resources out there. And that is the ethical responsibility of leadership, is that maintaining that structure and taking care of your staff in the best way that you can. And part of that is learning. Professional learning. So speaking to the other existential musings, this kind of really hit me, these inquiries, because I am someone who has a lot of existential thoughts and feelings, and it can make work so difficult and so hard to come back to during breaks. Because what is this purposelessness? How do I make purpose for myself? And one of the reality is, yes, adult ed can be a passion job, but there's also, it has to give you something back. And that's for any in the service industry. There is so much research, particularly on public health and the healthcare fields, about this. The issue is that it doesn't always touch on adult ed, and adult ed really needs this kind of research. But the research is on the effects of being in like these social services, as well as what these ideas do. And something that has come into conversations with people I know that work in healthcare is that this idea that you have to love what you do, or you have to take care of people because you're in healthcare, and it's like, well, it's a job. It's not personal, and it can't be, but it has to give you something back. It's not just you give. It has to give you a sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose, that is an individual kind of responsibility. So 2 books I had on my bookshelf, I pulled down right before this recording. The first one is So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. Why Skills Trump Passion in the Quest for Work You Love. When I read this book last year, it blew my mind. Like, it was brilliant, because the whole thesis here is that just doing a job because you love it or you're passionate of an aspect of it does not translate into the reality. And the author gives a lot of these instances of interviews that he's done with people who had to completely change their working life because going for what you love or your passion actually ended up being detrimental to them. So it's really more about skill building and then tying those skills to making what you work as something that gives back to you and not just pursuing the love first. And I wish I got this book when I was a teenager. I feel like this would have changed so much of my life if I understood that, because a general thing, I don't know if it's being said anymore, but something I heard a lot growing up, not from my family, of course, we're all immigrants, so we don't care about love and passion with work. You find a good job, take care of yourself and your family. But generally in American spaces is you have to find your passion, and that's how you'll be happy, is make work your passion, which is nonsense. It is absolute nonsense, because when you take something that you already love and you make it your every single day thing that you do for 40 hours a week, all that does is make what you love work. It doesn't make work that you love. So that book, I think, is something that people should read and really as a good reflection. It also helped me, like, in a way with the work I already do, is appreciate the stuff that I do enjoy. So that was like really excellent read. The second book, and this might tie to some of the stuff that our listener sent in, is David Graeber's Bullshit Jobs. Now, the thesis of this book is this idea that there are jobs that are, he defines the term and he used the term bullshit, which are completely meaningless. I'm not saying that your job is meaningless, listener, so much as breaking that down in that definition of what is meaninglessness and what is not. And some jobs are important or not bullshit, but they have meaning. But there are aspects of it that are meaningless and purposeless. That is something that I've been finding very fascinating about this. I'm still in the process of reading it, about halfway done. But this job also, again, made me appreciate my own work and aspects of it, and realizing that taking that stuff out of it, this is where there is purpose. Here is some nonsense. Here's nonsense that I don't like, but I know is important, like stuff like that. That's really helped me. And if you're one of those people that really does like to, like some of our listeners, is read, I would suggest some of that. Some of these stories are, with these interviews with people, are absolutely fascinating. But yeah, they kind of like make this idea of purpose really important, and tying all that back to what I said before, as purpose is really vital. So that's something that needs some exercise. I understand, listener, that you are in a point of constant stress and you don't have that ability to find that creativity again during the work time. And I hope on your break that you are able to kind of give back to that. One practice that I've been doing for the past couple of months that I found pretty useful is I have a mood journal, and I keep that in it's on my computer in my personal drive, so my personal email account. And every day I just break up the day into 3 sections: morning, afternoon, and evening. And I just write about my mood and what has affected my mood. Sometimes I miss a period or a day, but then I go back and change it. I also color code it. So I have different colors corresponding to the different moods I'm feeling. And I use green as good mood. So it's good mood day. I'm just giving that. I'm not going to go through all of them because I actually had to update it a few times when I had different moods than the norm. And like having that scroll, and I also date it too. So it's like in reverse order. So like the most recent date at top, and I just keep updating it. So when I scroll and I look at my whole week or my whole month as a whole, and I see all that green, it makes me appreciate like, okay, you know what? Sometimes things feel so overwhelming and so awful, but that is not indicative of my entire period, like my entire month. It's like a week or 2 or 3 days out of a month. And seeing that compared with all the green, I'm like, oh, okay. It helps me appreciate things a little more. And also, like, because I write out a little bit of what I did or what caused my mood, it makes me think more about that too. So when I look at my my existential days, I look at that and think, okay, what caused or what were these thoughts I had in my existential periods? What do I need to work on in those times? Because the thing is in this field, because we're so resource deprived, we are in constant survival mode. And a part of that survival mode is that you are not able to do anything. Exactly like listener wrote, you can't do anything more than just putting out the fires. And the part of the long-term effect of that is you're not seeing the results of your own work. And that's painful, especially as practitioners who are lower paid, who work long hours when we can, who try to, support this field. I have hope in that our field is well funded, as well as we're treated like professionals. And part of that professional treating each other as well as outside sources and parent institutions is being respected for the work that we do. And it's really hard when you're constantly in that survival mode to see that. So the reason why I bring that up is because a part of my mood journal is also when I'm in a good mood, go back, look at where my bad moods were and try to figure out ways to help myself, because you can't help yourself in the long run when you're in crisis mode. You do it later. And hopefully if you put that energy towards later work, then the next time you're in crisis mode, there is a potential that it will be felt less, that you will be able to manage. And that's also a part of my other stuff. So I do a lot of self-care, especially in the last year, where I had to really reflect on what I need as a human being. And a lot of stuff that I've talked about in this episode are stuff that I've changed mostly in the last year. Making more time for film, making more time for reading stuff I'm really into, being self-reflective, building community. Community is more important to me than so much else. And I was not putting any effort towards that until recently. And it's hard, and it's a really hard journey. And it's really hard in New Mexico and Albuquerque to build community, especially from the ground up. But it's given me back so much more just putting that effort in. So the reason why I say this is, like, you have to really sit down with yourself when you're in a better place and think about, what do I need in life? And maybe that looks like you have your own projects at work. Maybe that looks like you can delegate when you can. Maybe that looks like you leave your job. And I don't want to tell people that they should leave their job. But if something is taking so much away from you that is causing you that pain, you have to ask yourself, is this worth it? And that's something to just think about. And it doesn't mean that you're going to come up with the answer of no, and I'm going to quit. Maybe that comes up with, I have to find a way to make this meaning, or I have to reflect more, or add more of these tasks that give me meaning. Like, for example, when I've talked to practitioners who transitioned out of teaching into administrative roles, one thing they've mentioned missing is that student contact. So you're not in the classroom anymore, but if student contact gives you something, is there a way to continue that in some form? Is it like doing orientation or doing some sort of intake or visiting classes once a term and talking to the students and seeing how they're doing? Like, through constraint, there is opportunity. But part of finding those opportunities is having the space to actually look for them. Because if you're all burnt out, you're not doing anything but working and crashing. And that's not recovery, friends. I don't know if anyone's realized that, but if you have to crash every break to muster up enough energy to start again, a couple weeks, month later, whatever, you're not resting. And that is not relaxation. That is charging your battery up to a certain point of when you can move again. It's kind of like when your phone dies and you charge it for a little bit, but you're still using it. So you're charging it and then you're using it and you're depleting it. You are not returning with a full battery. You are putting your phone in the cycle of constant renewal. And that has long-term effects on the phone. You're actually not supposed to do that. It has an effect on human beings too. We're not supposed to work the way we do. We're not supposed to sit at computers for 8 hours a day. But does that mean quit your job and go be a farmer or something? Absolutely not. But look for ways that gives you back and gives your body something back. So that's kind of how I want to end this episode. Is I don't mean this in a negative way, but I mean it more of a call to action to yourself. How do you love and respect yourself as a way to heal and come back to form so that you can give back in the way you do in your role? And that's something, if anyone, please send out to the listservs, email me if you want to talk more about it, because I think this is something that we need to ask ourselves as a field. It's not just an individual thing. It's a serious issue. And that retention issue that the listener talked about, that energy it takes to hire, train, rehire, train, it does take away from everything else. And it takes away from our students, which you also have to consider. That is, if you're not at your best, what does that mean for the people around you? What does that mean for the people you work with, work for, your family, your friends? What does that do to you? So these are part of the existential musings that I have in that kind of call. So yeah, like I said, please reach out. If anyone just needs something to bounce ideas off of, to reach out, to ask for resources, or maybe if you want someone to complain about, please reach out to me. I'm more than I welcome those kind of conversations, because it's very important in the field that we take care of each other.
Absolutely. Very well put.
Connect with Adult Ed, the NMEA podcast, is a project of the Propel Professional Learning System and is funded by the New Mexico Higher Education Department's Adult Education Division. Thank you for listening.